Before I begin, if you enjoy real lifestyle stories about betrayal, survival, and karma, please subscribe and stay with me until the end. What I'm about to tell you saved my life and destroyed his. My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in the Midwest, and this is the story of how my husband tried to erase me while I was carrying his child, and how his own secrets buried him instead. I used to believe my marriage was boring in the safest way possible. Predictable, clean, respectable. Daniel and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5. He worked in corporate finance. I managed operations at a medical supply firm. No screaming fights, no broken plates, just routines, shared calendars, and polite kisses before work. When I found out I was pregnant, I cried alone in the bathroom. Not from joy, not from fear, but from confusion. We hadn't planned this. In fact, Daniel had been strangely distant for months. Still, when I told him that evening, he hugged me tightly and said, "This changes everything." At the time, I thought he meant in a good way. Looking back now, I realize it was a warning. 2 weeks later, Daniel became the perfect husband. He woke up early to make me breakfast, organic smoothies, prenatal vitamins lined up beside my glass like obedient soldiers. He insisted on driving me to work, even though my office was only 10 minutes away. He booked a surprise prenatal massage and rubbed my feet every night while watching shows he normally hated. Friends told me I was lucky. My mother said, "See, he just needed a reason to grow up." But something felt rehearsed. The affection wasn't warm, it was precise, like he was following instructions from a manual titled "How to Act Like a Loving Husband." Then came the morning sickness. One Tuesday, Daniel made an elaborate breakfast: scrambled eggs with herbs, avocado toast, fresh juice. The smell hit me like a wall. I barely made it to the sink. "I can't," I told him, gagging. "I'm sorry." He frowned for half a second, just a flicker. Then he smiled again. "No problem, I'll take it to work." That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. An hour later, my phone exploded with messages. "Are you okay? Claire, don't eat anything today. Call me now." I rushed into the office to find chaos. An ambulance outside, police, my coworkers whispering. Daniel's personal assistant, Emily, had collapsed at her desk. Severe allergic reaction. She'd gone into anaphylactic shock after eating breakfast someone had brought her. The same breakfast Daniel made for me. Emily survived, barely. Doctors later said the food contained crushed walnut oil. Emily had a documented severe nut allergy. Daniel told everyone it must have been a terrible accident. He claimed he didn't know. He cried in the hospital hallway, held my hand tightly while reporters asked questions. I remember thinking how strange it was that he never once looked shocked. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something inside me started connecting dots I didn't want to see. Emily wasn't just an assistant. She was young, pretty, always texting Daniel after hours. I had once found her earrings in our guest bathroom. Daniel laughed it off. She must have changed after work drinks. I told myself I was paranoid. But pregnancy sharpens instincts the way fire sharpens steel. 2 days later, I found something worse than earrings. I was looking for my prenatal records in Daniel's home office when a folder caught my eye. No label, tucked behind financial documents. Inside were insurance papers, life insurance papers. My name highlighted. Policy value, $2.5 million. Beneficiary, Daniel Harper. The policy had been increased 3 months earlier, 3 months before I got pregnant. My hands shook so badly I had to sit on the floor. I told myself there had to be an explanation. There wasn't. Over the next week, I stopped confronting and started observing. I noticed how Daniel always insisted I eat at home now, how he discouraged me from ordering takeout, how he insisted on natural remedies instead of medication when I felt sick. One night, I pretended to fall asleep early. I watched him from the hallway as he made tea in the kitchen, carefully, methodically. He opened a small, unmarked container and poured a few drops into the mug. Not poison, something worse. Later, I learned it was a medication that could induce miscarriage in high doses and organ failure if taken repeatedly. He brought the mug upstairs and kissed my forehead. "Drink it all," he whispered, "for the baby." That was the moment I knew. My husband wasn't trying to divorce me. He was trying to bury me, quietly, slowly, with sympathy and casseroles. But here's what Daniel didn't know. Emily wasn't just his mistress. She was pregnant too, and she thought he was leaving me for her. The same food meant for me almost killed her. The same man promising her a future was planning her silence too. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I smiled. I drank nothing he made ever again, and I started planning. Because if Daniel thought I was the naive, nauseous wife fading quietly into the background, he had no idea what kind of woman he'd married, and he had no idea what was about to happen to his perfect plan. I didn't confront Daniel, not that night, not the next morning. I learned very quickly that fear can make you reckless, but silence makes you dangerous. The next day, I played the role he expected, weak, pale, grateful. I let him drive me to work. I thanked him for the tea, but claimed my stomach was unsettled and I'd drink it later. I kissed his cheek and told him he was going to be an amazing father. He smiled, that same practiced smile. As soon as he left, I locked my office door and threw up. Not from morning sickness, but from adrenaline. I had 2 lives to protect now, mine and my unborn child's. I started with the insurance policy. Using my lunch break, I called the company anonymously, pretending to be a financial assistant verifying details. The representative confirmed everything: the increase, the beneficiary, the timing. When I asked if there had been any recent claims or inquiries, she hesitated. "Yes," she said carefully. "Your husband called last week asking about accidental death clauses." My chest tightened. Accidental. That word haunted me all day. That evening, I checked our shared credit card statements. There were charges I hadn't noticed before: hotel rooms during late meetings, pharmacy purchases at locations nowhere near his office. One charge stood out: a private lab. I Googled it. It specialized in discreet blood testing and prenatal paternity confirmation. My fingers went numb. I wasn't his only secret pregnancy. I needed proof, real proof, not suspicions, not instincts. So I did the one thing Daniel never expected. I reached out to Emily. I didn't accuse her. I didn't threaten her. I sent a simple message from a burner email. "I think we need to talk, for both our safety." She replied within minutes. We met at a quiet cafe across town. She looked thinner than I remembered, pale. Her hands trembled when she lifted her cup. "I didn't know he was married at first," she blurted out before I even sat down. "He told me you were separated." I nodded, calm, measured. "How far along are you?" I asked. She froze. "How did you—" "I know about the lab," I said, "and the breakfast." Her face drained of color. "He said that was an accident," she whispered. "He cried. He said he almost lost both of us." Both of us. That was confirmation enough. "He's not choosing you," I said softly. "And he's not protecting me. He's protecting himself." I slid the insurance document across the table. She read it slowly. When she reached the beneficiary line, her lips started to shake. "He told me he was drowning in debt," she said.
He said the baby scared him, but that he was trying. I leaned in. Emily, he's trying to clean his life, and pregnancies complicate that. Silence stretched between us. Then she said something that chilled me. He asked me last week if I had any food allergies. My stomach dropped. I told her everything. The tea, the medication, the policy, the timing. She started crying. Not dramatic sobs, quiet, broken breaths. He told me we'd go public after the first trimester, she said. He said he just needed time. I reached across the table. He's running out of time, and so are we. That was the moment we stopped being enemies. That night, I installed hidden cameras in the kitchen and office. I backed up every email, every text. I kept a private journal with dates, times, symptoms, anything that could show a pattern. I pretended to get worse. I told Daniel I felt dizzy, that my hands tingled, that I was scared. He responded exactly how I expected, with reassurance and more control. He insisted I take time off work. He canceled my yoga class for my safety. He scheduled a weekend getaway to a remote cabin owned by a colleague. No distractions, he said, just us. I smiled and agreed. Then I secretly sent my medical records to my sister, who's a nurse. She reviewed them and called me in tears. "Claire," she said, "whatever he's giving you, stop. Your liver enzymes are elevated. This isn't normal pregnancy." I knew, but hearing it made it real. I scheduled an appointment with my OB and told her everything. She immediately ordered tests and advised me to stay elsewhere temporarily. I told Daniel I was going to my mother's. He insisted on coming. I insisted harder. That night, while he slept, I went through his phone.
I found messages I wish I could erase from my mind. Plans, dates, conversations about timelines and loose ends. One message stood out. If something happens to her, it has to look natural. Stress, complications. She's older. Older? I was 34. Pregnant women weren't inconvenient to him. We were disposable. I forwarded everything to myself. Then I did something dangerous. I sent one message from his phone to Emily. "Meet me tomorrow. We need to talk about the baby." She showed it to me immediately. We decided it was time, not to run, but to expose him. Daniel thought he was the smartest person in every room. He thought love made women blind. He thought pregnancy made us weak. What he didn't realize was that desperation sharpens truth, and lies collapse under light. The weekend cabin trip was still on the calendar. I told him I'd go. I told him I trusted him, and that was the most dangerous lie of all, because by then, I wasn't walking into a trap. I was laying one. The cabin was 3 hours away, tucked deep into a stretch of forest with no cell service and only one narrow road in or out. Daniel said it was peaceful, healing, a place to reset before the baby comes. I heard something else. Isolation. I packed carefully. No medication he touched, no food he prepared. I brought sealed water bottles, protein bars, and my prenatal vitamins, ones my doctor had personally handed me. I also wore a small recording device clipped inside my jacket, and my phone tracked our location continuously, even offline. Before we left, I sent my sister the cabin address and a simple message: "If I don't check in by Sunday night, call the police." Daniel drove. He hummed softly, tapping the steering wheel, relaxed in a way that made my skin crawl. He reached over and squeezed my knee. "I'm really proud of you," he said. "You've been so strong." I smiled and looked out the window. The cabin looked exactly like the kind of place people disappear in movies. Old wood, stone chimney,
a lake behind it that reflected the trees like a dark mirror. No neighbors, no witnesses. As soon as we arrived, Daniel offered to make soup. I declined and pretended to feel tired. "I'll lie down," I said. "Maybe later." He nodded, too quickly. While he cooked, I slipped into the bedroom and turned on the hidden recorder. I sat on the bed and breathed slowly, listening.
I heard cabinets open. I heard liquid pour. I heard him humming again. When he brought the bowl upstairs, I was already under the blanket. "I added ginger," he said, "for nausea." I forced myself to lift the spoon, letting it hover near my lips. Then I gagged and turned away. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "The smell." His jaw tightened, just for a second. "Try later," he said, setting it on the nightstand. "You need nutrients." "I will." He left the room. I waited 10 minutes. Then I poured the soup into the toilet and flushed. That night, I pretended to sleep while he lay beside me scrolling on his phone. I could feel the tension radiating from him, like a wire pulled too tight. At 2:13 a.m., he got out of bed. I kept my breathing slow. I heard drawers open, then footsteps. He came back holding a glass. "Claire," he whispered, "drink some water." I opened my eyes halfway. "I'm fine," I murmured. "You're dehydrated," he insisted. "Please." I took the glass, brought it to my lips, then knocked it over accidentally, spilling it across the bed. "I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy lately." He stared at the wet sheets. For the first time, I saw it clearly. Not concern, anger. The mask cracked. "It's okay," he said finally, too evenly. "I'll get more." He never did. The next morning, he suggested a walk near the lake. "Fresh air," he said. "It'll help." I agreed. The path was narrow, winding along the water's edge. Slippery rocks, steep drops. He walked slightly ahead of me, too far ahead. We reached a quiet stretch where the trees closed in. "This is my favorite spot," he said, stopping near the edge. I stood a few steps back. The lake was still, dark. He continued. "This would be peaceful. No pain, no struggle." I felt my heart slam into my ribs. "What would?" I asked. He turned to face me, and for the first time in 8 years, he didn't pretend. "You know," he said calmly, "if something happened here, no one would question it. Pregnancy complications, slipped and fell, stress." I stepped back. "You don't have to do this. We can divorce. I'll sign whatever you want." He laughed. "You think I want to pay child support? For 2 kids?" 2. There it was. "You told her you'd leave me," I said. His eyes narrowed. "Did she tell you?" he snapped. That was his mistake. Because in that moment, he forgot to push me. He forgot the lake. He forgot the act. He revealed everything. "I never planned to leave you alive," he said. "Or her. 1 pregnancy was bad luck. 2 was a disaster." My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. "And the insurance?" I asked. He shrugged. "Accidents happen." I reached into my jacket, pressed stop on the recorder. He lunged. I screamed, not in fear, in rage. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root, falling hard onto the dirt. Pain exploded through my side. He grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the edge. "You're making this harder," he hissed. I kicked, screamed again, and then a voice. "Daniel!" He froze. Emily stood on the path behind us, alive, very pregnant, her phone raised, recording everything. His face collapsed. She hadn't been supposed to be there. She wasn't part of the plan. "I told you to wait," he snapped at her.
I told you to stop lying, she said, her voice shaking. You said you were ending it. I pulled myself free and scrambled away. Both of you are insane, Daniel said, backing up. This isn't what it looks like. Emily laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. It looks like attempted murder, she said. Sirens echoed in the distance. Daniel's head snapped up. He looked at me, at her, at the recorder in my hand, at the phone in hers, and for the first time, he was afraid. He ran. But the forest has a way of exposing the truth, and there was only one road out. Daniel ran blindly down the narrow path, tripping over roots, stumbling into the underbrush. The sirens grew louder. My sister had called the police before we even confronted him at the lake. Emily's recording had already been sent to them as evidence. I stayed behind, clutching my stomach and shaking. My pregnancy had never felt more vulnerable, but I also felt stronger than ever. Daniel's panic was contagious, but it was no longer my fear, it was his. Within minutes, officers arrived. They didn't need an explanation. The sight of Daniel panting, scratched, and wild-eyed was enough. Emily handed over her phone and explained everything. I pressed play on my recorder, letting the audio speak for itself. The tea, the talk about accidental death, the insurance plot. Every word sealed his fate.
Daniel tried to argue, tried to smile, tried to charm them, but the audio, the witnesses, the medical records, they didn't care about charm. One officer put him in handcuffs while another checked on me and Emily. As he was led away, I looked at him. 34 years old, once my husband, now a man destroyed by his own schemes. The anger in his eyes was replaced by disbelief. He hadn't expected that we would work together. He hadn't expected to survive. He hadn't expected to lose everything. The media caught wind of the story within hours. Headlines screamed, "Corporate husband accused of attempted murder, life insurance scam exposed." Friends called me in shock, some crying, some congratulating. I didn't answer most of them. This was my private victory. Emily and I sat together in my apartment that evening. We shared a pizza, something neither of us had eaten in weeks without fear. We laughed quietly, trying to soothe the tension in our bodies. Both of us were pregnant, and both of us had narrowly escaped a life-threatening betrayal. "You know," Emily said softly, rubbing her growing belly, "I never thought I'd survive this, or him." I nodded. I kept thinking about my baby, about you, about not letting him control our fate. She smiled faintly. We did it together. I thought about how Daniel had underestimated two things, our instincts and our solidarity. He had thought women were weak, dependent, and compliant. He had believed love and fear could be manipulated. He had forgotten that desperation sharpens resolve. The weeks that followed were surreal. Daniel's trial dominated local news. Court documents revealed more than even Emily and I had known. Hidden affairs, offshore accounts, manipulations, and his plan to quietly end both pregnancies while pocketing insurance payouts. His career imploded overnight. Colleagues testified about his obsessive control, his charm that masked ruthlessness, and his ruthless pursuit of money over morality. I attended the trial, holding my child's father tightly in my arms, though not Daniel's child, of course, just for emotional support. Each day, as evidence unfolded, Daniel's confidence crumbled. His attempts to manipulate the jury failed miserably. He was portrayed as the man who planned to kill the women who trusted him the most. During the final day of the trial, Emily gave a statement about her ordeal, the threats, and his obsession with removing obstacles to his freedom. I was by her side, holding her hand. Our shared trauma had forged a bond I couldn't have imagined. When the verdict was read, guilty on multiple counts of attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Not for him, never for him, but for the life we could now reclaim. In the aftermath, life became about rebuilding. I moved into a new apartment with Emily's support network. I kept a few mementos from the old life. mostly to remind myself how fragile safety can be. I returned to work part-time, balancing prenatal care and recovery. Friends who had doubted my instincts apologized quietly. One afternoon, I received a letter. It was from the life insurance company. They had voided the policies due to fraud and criminal intent. The money Daniel had schemed to claim would never touch his hands, or mine. Justice, in its quietest form, had been served. Emily and I began preparing for our children, knowing that fear had once tried to dictate our future, but could no longer. We planned baby showers, prenatal classes, and late-night talks about parenting. In the shared moments of laughter and hope, the trauma felt distant but never forgotten. At night, I often replayed the events in my mind, not the fear, but the strategy, the calm in chaos, the choices that saved our lives. I realized that survival wasn't about brute force. It was about observation, patience, and courage. Daniel, now behind bars, had lost not only his freedom but the image he had meticulously built. The man who once smiled perfectly, who calculated every move, had been undone by his own obsession and arrogance. He had underestimated the strength of the women he thought he could control. Sometimes, when the evening sun hits just right, I think about that lake, that cabin, and the day his plan finally turned against him. And I feel a wave of gratitude, not just for survival, but for the clarity it brought. The most powerful lesson: trust instincts, notice the tiny inconsistencies, and never, ever underestimate the resolve of someone fighting for life, for their child, for truth. Emily and I stayed close, supporting each other through pregnancies, childbirth, and sleepless nights. Every kick, every ultrasound, every quiet laugh in the nursery felt like reclaiming pieces of life Daniel had tried to take. The months after the trial were strange, peaceful, but tentative. I moved into a smaller apartment downtown, furnished with light colors and plants that smelled faintly of lavender. Every morning, I walked past the window and reminded myself that Daniel could no longer control my life. He was a memory, a cautionary tale, a headline in the local paper, but he was not my story anymore. Emily and I became a support system for each other. Every appointment, every anxious kick from our babies, every conversation about what kind of mothers we wanted to be was a step toward reclaiming our agency. We laughed about the absurdity of surviving someone so calculating. And yes, we cried sometimes, quietly, in private, over the trauma we had endured. I started therapy. At first, I resisted. I had always considered myself strong, capable, resilient. But the truth was, surviving an attempted betrayal, manipulation, and near-death experience leaves invisible scars. Talking to someone trained to listen, to guide me through the aftermath, helped me understand my own emotions: fear, anger, relief, and even guilt. Daniel's presence lingered like a shadow, though. Even in prison, the knowledge that someone had once plotted my death while smiling in my face left a subtle tension in my daily life. I became hyper-aware, sometimes paranoid. Every new colleague, every unexpected phone call made me pause. But over time, with Emily's support and therapy, the tension eased. I learned to reclaim trust cautiously, starting with small things like letting a friend babysit for an hour or answering emails promptly. One afternoon, I returned to the lake cabin. It had been months since the confrontation. The place was abandoned, overgrown at the edges, but still eerily peaceful. I sat on the same rock where Daniel had tried to corner me and breathed deeply. The water was calm, reflecting the sky like a mirror. I felt a strange closure being there, acknowledging the place, acknowledging what had happened, but also acknowledging that it no longer had power over me. I thought about Daniel, about how fragile his carefully constructed life had been.
He had believed himself untouchable, clever enough to manipulate love, fear, and life itself. And yet, all it took was truth, observation, and courage to dismantle everything. It was a humbling realization. Sometimes it's not strength that wins, but clarity, patience, and willingness to act decisively. The media coverage faded slowly. Daniel's name remained in court records, occasionally resurfacing in a headline about his appeal or his behavior in prison. I refused to read most of it. I didn't need the reminder. What mattered was here, in my life, in my home, in the soft morning light filtering through my curtains, and in the growing life inside me.
I began writing again. Not for anyone, not for fame, but for me. Journaling became a tool to process anger, fear, and triumph. I documented the events meticulously, not for legal reasons, but to ensure I never forgot the lessons learned, the importance of intuition, the value of solidarity, the consequences of betrayal, and the strength that lies in survival. Emily and I also started an informal support group for women recovering from abusive relationships or manipulative partners. We shared stories, offered advice, and slowly, quietly, helped others regain their lives. There was healing in this, a sense of purpose that extended beyond our own survival. Helping others gave the trauma a positive direction. It was no longer just about what Daniel had done, but what we could do with the lives we had reclaimed. Pregnancy progressed without incident. I felt stronger, more vigilant, but also more confident. Each ultrasound, each doctor's visit reminded me that life was resilient, that new beginnings were possible. The baby's kicks were little reminders that we had survived, that love and hope still existed even after betrayal. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about Daniel's arrogance, how easily he had underestimated women, how he had thought planning and manipulation could override intuition and courage. His mistakes weren't just his downfall, they were proof of a fundamental truth. Deception only works until the deceived recognize it. Once clarity emerges, lies collapse like fragile glass. Emily gave birth a few weeks before me. Holding her child for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for survival, but for justice, for resilience, for the opportunity to watch innocence enter the world safely. The trauma of what Daniel had intended to do faded in those first tiny cries, replaced by awe, hope, and fierce protective love. When my own child was born, I held them close and felt a surge of emotion I had never known: relief, joy, amazement, and a deep understanding of the stakes I had fought to protect. I whispered promises I intended to keep: safety, love, truth. No schemes, no manipulation, only life, fully and completely. Life gradually returned to a rhythm: simple joys, morning coffee, laughter with friends, and gentle walks with my baby became profound reminders of freedom. Every day I survived, every milestone my child reached, every quiet evening Emily and I shared was a victory over fear and manipulation. And somewhere, far away behind prison walls, Daniel remained a cautionary tale, his power gone, his influence nullified, his arrogance exposed. He had sought to erase life and love, but in trying, he ensured his own ruin. I never forgave him. I didn't need to. Forgiveness is for the living, and Daniel had already made himself irrelevant in my life. What mattered was the world I was building, safe, honest, and full of love, a world he could never touch again. The months after my child's birth were transformative. I watched tiny fingers curl around mine, little legs kick, and bright eyes blink up at me. Every day was a lesson in gratitude. Every night, I reflected on how close I had come to losing everything: my life, my child, and my sense of trust in the world. Emily and I stayed close. Our children grew together, almost like siblings, though unrelated by blood. We shared baby milestones, first steps, first words, and countless sleepless nights. We became a makeshift family, bonded by survival, resilience, and a shared determination to never let fear dictate our lives again. I occasionally thought about Daniel, the man who had once plotted to erase me. He was still in prison, stripped of freedom, respect, and influence. The media had long since moved on, leaving only court records and cautionary tales for those researching criminal cases. I felt no joy in his suffering, only relief that he could no longer harm anyone, and a quiet satisfaction in the justice we had achieved. For a long time, I questioned myself. How had I missed the signs for so long? Why had I trusted someone so completely, even when intuition whispered warnings? But then I realized that life is rarely perfect, and people, even those we love, can be capable of darkness we never imagine. Recognizing it, surviving it, and acting decisively is what shapes us into stronger, wiser versions of ourselves. I returned to work slowly, balancing motherhood with career responsibilities. My company knew about my situation and offered support, but I quickly realized that my own vigilance was the greatest protection I could provide. I implemented systems at home and at work to ensure nothing like Daniel's schemes could ever happen again. I also found comfort in small routines: morning walks with my baby in the stroller, quiet evenings reading by the window, shared laughter with Emily over coffee while the babies napped. These moments, ordinary to the outside world, became profound reminders that life could be peaceful, joyful, and safe again. Over time, I shared my story publicly, not for notoriety, but as a cautionary tale and a message of hope. I spoke at community groups, women's support networks, and prenatal classes, highlighting the importance of trust, intuition, and vigilance. Women approached me afterward, some tearful, some inspired, sharing their own near misses, betrayals, and struggles. The shared experiences created a network of resilience, a community of survivors, and a powerful reminder that we are stronger together. I also reflected on Daniel's mistakes. He had assumed control and manipulation could guarantee outcomes. He had ignored empathy, morality, and the power of informed, determined women. His downfall was not just legal, it was deeply personal. He had believed himself untouchable, and yet the very women he sought to control had dismantled his entire life. It was a stark lesson in arrogance, one that I carried silently as a reminder of both vulnerability and power. One evening, sitting on my balcony with the baby sleeping beside me, Emily called. She had a small victory to share. Her maternity leave was extended, and her work recognized her courage during the ordeal. We laughed together, quietly celebrating. It was a subtle reminder that life continued, slowly but beautifully, even after darkness. I thought about the lake cabin, the place where everything had almost ended, and yet where justice began. I realized that fear had been a teacher, not a prison. The near-death experience had honed my instincts, sharpened my courage, and revealed the depths of human resilience. It had taught me that survival was about awareness, patience, and action. As my child grew, I felt an unshakable bond, not only to my baby, but to the life I had fought to preserve. Each milestone, each smile, each giggle reinforced the truth that love and vigilance together could overcome even the darkest of schemes. I also reflected on Emily. Without her courage, her honesty, and her willingness to confront the truth, Daniel's plan might have succeeded in ways we cannot imagine. Our solidarity had been our greatest weapon. I understood now that betrayal could only succeed if victims remained divided. Together, we had turned the tide. In quiet moments, I imagined Daniel behind bars, reflecting on his arrogance. I pictured him realizing too late that control and manipulation cannot overpower truth, courage, and resilience. That image, while chilling, reminded me that justice often works quietly, with precision, and with consequences that are both legal and deeply personal. As the years passed, my life continued to stabilize. Career, family, friendships, and community grew stronger. The trauma of the past never disappeared completely, but it became a source of insight, empathy, and strength. I knew I had survived not just for myself, but for my child, for Emily, and for every woman who might face deception and danger in silence. Looking back, the most important lesson I carry is simple. Trust your instincts, observe carefully, and act decisively. Danger often hides behind ordinary smiles, routine gestures, and the illusion of safety. But clarity, patience, and courage can protect life, love, and the future. Daniel's plot failed. His secrets destroyed him, and in the end, we, the women he sought to control, survived, flourished, and reclaimed life on our own terms. Every time I watch my child laugh, I feel the weight of that survival and the freedom it represents. Life, after all, is not just about existing, it's about reclaiming joy, defending truth, and building a future where love, safety, and courage triumph over deceit. And that is exactly the life I intend to live, vigilant, fearless, and full of hope. This concludes the full 6,000-word story in 6 parts. It's ready for direct voice generation without additional lines, timestamps, or edits. If you want, I can also create a YouTube thumbnail text suggestion and hook lines tailored for American audiences that match the story's emotional punch and suspense.